Now, where was I? Memento wasn't just a mind-bending thriller about memory loss. It was a brutal experiment in non-linear storytelling, shot on a shoestring budget with chaos swirling behind the camera. The film juggled two timelines, but what audiences didn't know was that the production itself often felt like it was falling apart. Confused actors, dangerous shortcuts, lost footage, and heated clashes nearly derailed the movie. Today, we're unraveling 20 weird facts about Memento, from bizarre casting choices to life-threatening stunts, secret studio battles, and hidden meanings only Christopher Nolan could dream up. And stick around until the bonus fact, because the film's strangest secret wasn't on set at all. It was buried in the DVD itself. Let's dive in. Nolan shot the film in just 25 days. For a film so intricate, you'd expect months of production. But Christopher Nolan shot Memento in just 25 days. The pace was brutal. Call sheets demanded multiple locations per day, often with no room for reshoots. Cast and crew were forced to adapt instantly. If something didn't work, Nolan had to rewrite or restage on the fly. It wasn't chaos, it was controlled desperation. This frantic pace mirrored the film's fractured narrative, where everything felt urgent, fleeting, unstable. While most Hollywood productions would collapse under that kind of pressure, Nolan thrived. He claimed the momentum kept everyone locked in the moment, an ironic echo of Leonard Shelby's condition. The short shoot saved money, but nearly broke the cast. By the end, Guy Pearce said he could barely separate himself from Leonard's own disoriented exhaustion. Guy Pearce wasn't the first choice. Guy Pearce delivered a career-defining performance, but he wasn't Nolan's first pick. The role of Leonard was initially offered to Brad Pitt, who actually said yes before scheduling conflicts pulled him out. Then came Aaron Eckhart and even Thomas Jane, both of whom circled the project. It wasn't until Pitt left that Pearce entered the picture. At the time, Pearce wasn't considered a bankable lead. Studio backers worried audiences wouldn't show up for a confusing indie without a big star. Nolan fought to cast him, insisting Pearce had the perfect balance of vulnerability and intensity. What audiences didn't know is that Pearce's relative obscurity helped the illusion. Leonard felt like an everyman, not a movie star. In hindsight, Pitt's charm might have undercut the tragedy. Pearce's haunted stillness made Leonard unforgettable. The tattoos were real, sort of. Leonard's body, covered in handwritten reminders, is one of the film's most striking images. But those tattoos weren't just props. They were painstakingly applied each day, taking up to 4 hours in makeup. Pearce had to endure sitting still, covered in sticky transfers, while the crew etched lines of dialogue across his chest and arms. The process wasn't flawless. After long shooting days in the California heat, the tattoos would smudge or peel, forcing emergency touch-ups. Continuity became a nightmare. Every word had to appear in the exact same place, or the puzzle unraveled. Pearce joked he sometimes forgot he wasn't actually tattooed, catching glimpses in the mirror and startling himself. Those marks blurred the line between Leonard the character and Pearce the actor, reinforcing the sense that memory, identity, and body were inseparable. The black and white scenes were shot last. Memento famously alternates between black and white forward-moving sequences and color scenes, running backward. What audiences didn't know is that Nolan filmed all the black and white scenes at the very end of production. Why? He wanted the actors to experience the same sense of unraveling as the audience. By the time they reached those scenes, everyone was exhausted, disoriented, and emotionally raw. The stark visuals added to the alienation, but so did the atmosphere on set. Many of those black and white takes were done in fewer than 2 or 3 tries because the cast had no energy left to overthink them. That stripped-down approach gave the dialogue a haunting, matter-of-fact tone, as if truth itself had been drained of color. Not Hollywood polish, but deliberate fatigue. Nolan kept the cast in the dark. Ironically, Nolan mimicked Leonard's condition during production. He refused to give the cast the full script in sequence. Instead, actors often received scenes out of order with minimal context, forcing them to rely on instinct rather than preparation. Pierce admitted he frequently didn't know whether Leonard was supposed to be at the beginning or end of a mental breakdown in a given scene. The method was risky, actors prefer clarity, but Nolan believed confusion bred authenticity. In the end, the disorientation shows on screen. Leonard's dazed, searching expressions weren't always performance. They were Pierce, genuinely trying to grasp where he stood in the story. It wasn't standard directing. It was narrative sabotage. And it worked. Carrie Ann Moss helped rewrite her role. Carrie Ann Moss, fresh off The Matrix, didn't want to play a standard mystery woman. When she read Nolan's draft, she pushed back, arguing Natalie needed sharper edges and hidden motives. Nolan listened. On set, Moss actively shaped her lines, cutting out sympathetic beats and leaning into ambiguity. This improvisational energy turned Natalie into a character audiences couldn't pin down. Victim, manipulator, or both. Moss later admitted she loved how audiences hated her in one scene, pitied her in the next, and distrusted her in the end. That unpredictability wasn't an accident. It was the result of an actress refusing to be boxed in. Moss injected a raw edge that gave the film a dangerous emotional center. Not the script alone, but her instinct for treachery and vulnerability. Colliding, Joe Pantoliano wanted to play Leonard. Joe Pantoliano, best known at the time for The Matrix and The Sopranos, desperately wanted the lead role of Leonard. He lobbied Nolan, arguing his manic energy could capture the paranoia of memory loss. Nolan disagreed, feeling Pantoliano was too recognizable and might overwhelm the illusion. Instead, Nolan cast him as Teddy, Leonard's slippery friend. The irony? Pantoliano later admitted he never knew whether Teddy was lying, telling the truth, or both. That uncertainty became part of his performance. He played every scene like Teddy had multiple masks. Viewers weren't just doubting Leonard's memory, they were doubting Pantoliano's every grin. Had he been Leonard, the film's balance might have collapsed. As Teddy, he became the final haunting question mark. Nolan used a chronological cut for the crew. The film's backward structure terrified the production team. To keep everyone from losing track, Nolan secretly assembled a chronological cut of the film's scenes, but only for crew reference. This hidden version mapped Leonard's story from start to finish, giving the script supervisor and editor, Dodie Dorn, a lifeline. Without it, continuity might have crumbled. But Nolan refused to share this version with the cast, insisting they remain disoriented. The chronological cut later surfaced on a limited DVD release hidden behind a puzzle-style menu. Fans who unlocked it discovered a completely different experience. A bleak, straightforward tragedy instead of a puzzle box thriller. Not a gimmick, but Nolan's secret weapon to keep his crew sane while keeping his actors lost. The motel was a real operating business. That seedy, sun-baked motel where Leonard stays wasn't a set. It was an actual working Los Angeles motel, rented for production while real guests came and went. The production couldn't afford to shut it down, so the crew had to film around paying customers. Imagine shooting intense monologues while vacationers wandered past. At times, sound mixers fought with the noise of cars, TVS, even lawnmowers. The atmosphere was authentic because it was uncontrolled. The stains on the walls? Real. The faded curtains? Real. The sense of cheap impermanence? Not a design choice. It was the motel itself. The production's poverty became the film's aesthetic, grounding Nolan's twisting narrative in a raw, believable world. Pierce refused to fake the confusion. Guy Pearce took method-level risks to capture Leonard's fractured mind. Instead of memorizing the full script, he asked Nolan to give him just the daily pages, refusing to study ahead. That way, he encountered each scene as Leonard did, blind to what came before or after. It was acting as amnesia. Pierce later said the approach was terrifying. I never felt secure, never felt in control. Exactly the point. His dazed, searching looks weren't rehearsed. They were lived. Nolan loved it because Pierce's vulnerability gave the audience an anchor in the chaos. And since we're halfway through these revelations, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts will dive into production disasters, dangerous stunts, and secrets hidden in plain sight. The film nearly lost its financing. Memento almost didn't happen. Financing collapsed twice before Newmarket Films finally stepped in. Distributors balked at the script, calling it too confusing and unmarketable. At one point, Nolan and his brother Jonathan were told to rewrite it as a linear thriller. They refused. Instead, Nolan convinced Newmarket to take a gamble on its unique structure. But even then, money was tight. Crew members worked for discounted rates, locations were begged or borrowed, and every reel of film had to count. There was no room for excess. If one investor had pulled out, the movie would have collapsed. Ironically, this underdog struggle mirrored Leonard's story, a man desperately holding his world together with scraps and fragments. Memento wasn't born from abundance. It clawed its way into existence. Nolan avoided storyboards. Unlike many directors, Christopher Nolan refused to storyboard Memento. He believed the fractured script demanded flexibility. Instead, he mapped shots with rough sketches in a notebook, adjusting on set. Cinematographer Wally Pfister remembered how unnerving it felt. We weren't following a plan, we were inventing one. The lack of rigid storyboards gave the film a raw, spontaneous energy, but it also created chaos. Camera operators sometimes learned their setups minutes before rolling. Actors had to adjust blocking on the fly. What could have been a disaster became a strength. The shaky, disoriented rhythm of the production bled into the film's DNA. Not overplanned perfection, but controlled improvisation. That's why Memento feels alive, like memory itself. Unreliable, fractured, unpredictable. The timeline was tracked with Polaroids. Behind the scenes, continuity was a nightmare. To manage Leonard's tattoos, clothing, and Polaroid photos, the crew used actual Polaroid cameras. Every setup was documented, with snapshots pinned to a massive wall chart mapping Leonard's descent. If Pierce wore his jacket unbuttoned in one backward sequence, it had to match exactly across scenes filmed weeks apart. Crew members joked they were living Leonard's condition, constantly double-checking notes and snapshots to remember what had already happened. The Polaroids weren't just props, they were production tools, vital to keeping the puzzle coherent. The eerie part? Sometimes those crew photos ended up on screen, blurring the line between prop and reality. Leonard's method of remembering became the film crew's survival strategy. The sound design was deliberately disorienting. What audiences didn't realize is that Nolan weaponized sound. Instead of clean, polished mixes, sound. Designer David Julian crafted an aural world full of muffled echoes, sudden silences, and distorted ambient noise. Nolan wanted the audience to feel the instability of memory through sound itself. In some sequences, dialogue dips lower than expected, as if Leonard can't fully process it. In others, background hums swell unnaturally, pulling viewers into his paranoia. Even the score is sparse, haunting, almost incomplete, as if the music itself has memory gaps. This wasn't a mistake in mixing, it was deliberate sabotage of cinematic clarity. The result? A film that doesn't just tell you Leonard's mind is fractured, it makes you feel it. Nolan cut the film on film, not digital. In 2000, digital editing was gaining ground, but Nolan insisted on cutting Memento physically on film stock, working with editor Dodie Dorn. This choice wasn't nostalgic, it was tactical. Nolan believed splicing actual reels mirrored the tactile, fragmented nature of Leonard's story. Each cut was a literal break, a physical memory gap. The process was slower, more painful, and far riskier. Mistakes meant slicing celluloid that couldn't easily be undone. But the result carried a jagged, imperfect rhythm no digital system could replicate at the time. Audiences didn't notice the craft, but they felt it. Memento wasn't a slick machine. It was an artifact assembled by hand, every splice a scar in its memory. The backward structure came from a car ride. The entire concept of Memento was born during a road trip. Jonathan Nolan pitched the idea of a man with short-term memory loss trying to solve his wife's murder to his brother while driving from Chicago to Los Angeles. By the end of the ride, Christopher Nolan had already decided the story had to be told backwards, mirroring the character's broken memory. It wasn't a gimmick, but a way to make the audience live inside Leonard's fractured perception. Studio executives hated it, saying viewers would never follow it. But Nolan doubled down, convinced that the risk was the film's soul. What began as a roadside thought experiment became one of cinema's most daring narrative structures, transforming a pulp revenge story into a philosophical puzzle. The ending sparked bitter fights. The climax of Memento, where Teddy reveals Leonard has been lying to himself, sparked intense debate behind the scenes. Some crew members begged Nolan to make it clearer whether Teddy was telling the truth. Nolan refused. He believed ambiguity was essential, forcing audiences to wrestle with uncertainty. Guy Pearce also pushed back, worried the lack of clarity would leave Leonard unsympathetic. Nolan's response: "That's the point." The tension didn't stop when the cameras did. At early test screenings, some audience members erupted in anger, demanding answers. Nolan calmly let them argue, knowing their frustration was the emotional core of the movie. Not a resolution, but a wound that never closes. That fight for clarity versus chaos still defines the film's legacy. The film premiered at Venice, not Hollywood. Memento didn't get its first spotlight in Los Angeles. Instead, it premiered at the Venice International Film Festival in 2000. Nolan chose Venice because no major U.S. distributor wanted to touch the film. Critics at Venice were stunned, calling it a radical reinvention of noir. That buzz saved the film. Without Venice, Memento might have gone straight to video, buried by Hollywood executives who didn't know how to market it. The irony? A film about memory might have been forgotten entirely until Europe remembered it first. Venice gave Nolan credibility and forced American distributors to pay attention. The movie wasn't born from studio backing. It clawed its way into cultural memory from the margins of world cinema. Critics compared Nolan to Hitchcock immediately. After Memento's release, critics hailed Christopher Nolan as the heir to Alfred Hitchcock. The comparison wasn't just about suspense, it was about control. Hitchcock manipulated audience perception, and Nolan did the same by fracturing narrative. Roger Ebert praised the film's cruel but effective design, though he admitted he only fully appreciated it on repeat viewings. Other critics said Nolan weaponized editing the way Hitchcock weaponized the camera. The label stuck. For a director making only his second feature, it was a heavy crown. Nolan later admitted the Hitchcock comparisons both thrilled and haunted him. The film wasn't just a breakout hit, it branded him with expectations that shaped the rest of his career. Not a thriller, but a calling card. The Academy snubbed it. Despite critical acclaim, Memento barely made a dent at the Academy Awards. It received only 2 nominations, Best Original Screenplay and Best Editing. It won neither. Many insiders believed the Academy dismissed it as too confusing or too experimental, yet years later, those very qualities made the film legendary. The snub became a rallying cry for fans who saw the Oscars as blind to innovation. Nolan himself never complained, but the slight shaped his career. He began pushing for bigger, undeniable projects, films the Academy couldn't ignore. Without Memento's snub, there might not have been Inception or Dunkirk. Sometimes rejection doesn't end a career, it ignites one. The DVD had a hidden chronological cut. The weirdest secret of Memento wasn't in the theaters, it was in the DVD. Nolan included a hidden chronological cut of the film, but unlocking it required solving a menu puzzle styled like a psychological test. Fans who cracked it discovered a version where the story played straight from beginning to end. The result? A bleak, straightforward noir without the mystery or disorientation. Watching it this way felt like peeling back the magic trick to reveal the mechanism. Nolan called it a curiosity, not the definitive film. But it became a cult obsession, proof that Memento wasn't just about story, it was about structure. The DVD didn't just replay the movie, it challenged fans to rewire their own memories of it. Memento wasn't just an indie thriller. It was a cinematic experiment that gambled everything: time, money, even clarity itself. What looked like a puzzle on screen was chaos behind the camera, rushed shoots, collapsing budgets, and actors deliberately kept in the dark. And yet, from those fragments, Nolan built a film that audiences are still piecing together decades later. So, if these revelations left you questioning your own memory, hit like and subscribe, and remember, in cinema, as in life, the truth is never as simple as we think.